Welcome to Cyber Threat Intel, your go-to source for the latest updates, news, and insights on cyber threats. Our goal is to arm you with the knowledge to protect yourself in the digital age, whether you're a cybersecurity professional or just curious about the threats lurking in the digital shadows. Make sure to subscribe now on YouTube or your favorite podcast listening platform to join us on the front lines of cybersecurity, because in the world of cyber threats, knowledge is power. Welcome. This is Cyber Threat Intel. I'm your host, John Good. This is episode number 53. And it's Wednesday, June 19th, 2024. Glad to see you if you're joining the show for the first time, checking out the content. If you're returning from another episode or some other content, glad to see you back, getting your fix of cyber threat intel. With that being said, if you need a snack or a drink to get you through the content, make sure you run and grab that first. And then also, if you want to see the articles and everything that we cover, head on over to cyberthreatintel.com. Again, cyberthreatintel.com. And you can find more information about the show, again, as well as the articles that we cover in the show. With that being said, let's go ahead and flip on over my screen here and hop into the articles. All right, so first article here, 2 men plead guilty for hacking into law enforcement portal and threatening victim. 2 Rhode Island men pleaded guilty to hacking into a confidential federal law enforcement database and using sensitive information to threaten and extort a victim. Cigar Steven Sin, 20, and Nicholas Serralo, 26, were members of a hacking group called Vile that collected victims' personal data to harass, threaten, or extort them in a practice known as doxing. Prosecutors say victims could pay to have their information removed from or kept off Vile's public website. So this is always interesting when these attackers go after law enforcement or, heavily guarded kind of systems, government systems, things like that. That seems like even a worse idea than just hacking into somebody. It says, according to the press release on May 7th, 2022, Sen used a stolen password belonging to a police officer to access a non-public, password-protected federal law enforcement portal. The portal, maintained by the U.S. Drug Enforcement Agency, the DEA, brilliant, holds detailed records on narcotics and currency seizures, as well as law enforcement intelligence reports with respective state and local agencies. Shortly after Sen used the database to obtain personal information on an individual, he messaged the victim, referred to in court documents as Victim 1, threatening to harm their family if they did not provide login credentials to their Instagram accounts. So Instagram, of all things. To prove he had access to sensitive information, he included Victim 1's social security number, driver's license number, and home address. He then instructed Victim 1 to sell access to the Instagram accounts and give him the money. So all in all, just not a brilliant strategy here. Both of these people were charged in March 2023 with computer intrusion conspiracy and aggravated identity theft. Sen pleaded guilty to both counts on June 17th, while Serralo had done so on May 30th, the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Eastern District of New York announced. So again, it's always interesting when these people go after law enforcement databases and things of that nature, because it just makes you kind of scratch your head. Why would you do that? That doesn't even make sense. You know you're going to get caught. But also, think about this. This brings up one thing that I want to talk about and that comes to my mind is when we're talking about authentication measures and logging credentials and getting into systems, what kinds of things are you logging in your organization? One of the things that you have to be aware of, and that traditionally, frankly, a lot of businesses and teams have done a really poor job of, is not just login failures, but what about login successes? So successful logins, things that are actually permitted to happen with legitimate accounts. Because if you're not looking for those things, then you can totally overlook legitimate activity, I should say, or activity by legitimate accounts, which could have been compromised. If you're not looking for that, then how are you going to find out the actions taken by a compromised account? You're not. You're not looking for it, because the default, or kind of the first instinct, is to look for just failures. Just look for the things that are drawing suspicion. Remember, insider threats, even if it's not a compromised account, if it's somebody that has a legitimate account, they're actually using their own account, but they're doing things within there that they really shouldn't be doing, even though they have access to it or whatever the case is, you have to look for that stuff because, again, insider threats can be just as dangerous in a lot of cases, if not more, because they're not going to trigger a lot of those alarms. So keep that in mind. Let's keep moving here. Next article, cut and paste tactics import malware to unwitting victims. Threat actors are using fake browser updates and software fixes to trick users into cutting and copying and pasting PowerShell scripts loaded with various malware strains, including remote access Trojans or rats and info sealers, to infect their computers. There appear to be two methods of social engineering used in this activity, and this is all attributed to TA 571. One that offers fake browser updates and yet another clear fake campaign, and the other that delivers error messages related to Word, Google Chrome, and OneDrive, dubbed Click Fix by the researchers. Malware delivered in the campaign includes Darkgate and Net Support rats, and malware-loaded Matan-Bucus, and various information stealers, including Luma and Vidar. The campaign shows users are a pop-up text box that suggests an error occurred when trying to open the document or web page, and further instructions to copy and paste a malicious script into either the PowerShell terminal or the Windows Run dialog box to eventually execute the script via PowerShell, they said. Attackers use clever and authoritative social engineering and the fake error messages delivered to users in the campaign, and also provides both the problem and a solution so that a viewer may take prompt action without pausing to consider the risk, the researchers noted. So that's a real common thing with social engineering in general, is this idea of instilling fear or instilling instant action. That way the person is they are so convinced they need to do whatever it is that they don't even think about it. It's just convincing enough that if you are pressing hard enough on them to do something, that they'll just do it instantly. And that's a very common thing with social engineering. You don't want the victim to kind of second guess what they're going to do. And that's why a lot of times these social engineers are fairly successful, because they're able to really exploit human nature and kind of how we think about things and how we act with those things. The other thing that I'll point out here is this whole idea of basically using what appears to be a very legitimate kind of pop-up box or something of that nature. It's a very unsophisticated attack in a lot of cases. And that's true with a lot of social engineering attacks. They don't always have to be super sophisticated. Even these attacks that breach into major companies, they're not always super sophisticated attacks. Sometimes they're just as simple as a basic HTML web page that frankly seems legitimate. And then people click it, or people put in their user credentials. These are very basic kind of things in a lot of cases, which is not, is kind of counterintuitive. We don't think that that is necessarily going to be the situation. We think of these big, elaborate nation-state 0 days that are going to exploit our organization, but that's usually not the case. Let's go back to the article here. Proofpoint observed TA 571 using cut and paste PowerShell against victims as early as March 1st in a campaign that included more than 100,000 messages and targeted thousands of organizations globally. So think about that. That is a pretty mass scale attack. Obviously, it's not a billion email address, a billion messages or something like that, but 100,000 messages. That's a pretty substantial campaign there for sure. So again, using very basic things, using email, using basic attachments. Overall, the attack chain requires significant user interaction. We know that because it requires them to put the code into PowerShell or into the Windows Run box to be successful, which means the most practical way for organizations to help avoid compromise on their network is employee awareness and training, the researchers noted. So again, think about this. Unsophisticated attacks. thinking about training our employees and making sure they are more aware of what they might see so that they, when they do see it, that they're kind of aware, they're kind of already in that mindset. We don't want employees to be surprised by a certain attack if we can avoid it, because the more that they're educated, the more they're aware, even if they aren't remembering every single piece of that training, but they remember the major points, maybe what it looks like, the delivery mechanism, those kinds of things. All that education over time adds up into more aware employees. More aware employees are less likely to click on links, click on things that they probably shouldn't click on that are going to lead to your network being compromised. So that is such an important aspect of a good security program, is user awareness, user training. That is crucial to you being successful in your security department or in your security program. Next article, Blackbaud fined $6.75 million after 2020 ransomware attack. Blackbaud, a South Carolina-based software company, has been ordered by the California Attorney General's office to pay $6.75 million to settle a ransomware attack that took place in May 2020. After Blackbaud revealed the threat actors compromised unencrypted social security numbers, bank account details, and login credentials, the company then made misleading statements about the sufficiency of its data security efforts prior to the breach and about the extent of the breach to its nonprofit customers and the public, stated the Attorney General's press release. These actions violated the reasonable data security law, unfair competition law, and false advertising law related to data security. Private information from 13,000 nonprofits, universities, hospitals, and other organizations were compromised through Blackbaud, according to a government-led investigation, leading the company to pay a ransom of 24 bitcoins or $250,000. So I want you to think about this. This is a really, really important point here. This whole idea of not only having sensitive information, security numbers, bank account details, those kinds of things, having those in an unencrypted format. Huge mistake, bad idea. That is one of those things that you just have to do. You cannot take this data in, process it, and store it, especially, but all of those things, take it, process it, and store it in an unencrypted format. That is so unacceptable. Just cannot imagine that. Okay, that is one thing that you absolutely have to do. There's no exception to that. Okay, so do that. Make sure you're doing it. If you don't do it, go do it now. The other thing is, when you get breached, because most companies are going to get breached to some extent at some point, hopefully you don't, but if you do get breached, do not mislead stakeholders or people that are involved, people that you have to notify, the government, things like that. Do not mislead the sufficiency of your program, of your security program. That is one of the worst things that you can do. Countless times over the last, especially the last 10 years, where security has been more in the focus, in the spotlight here. But we have seen countless examples of people trying to hide or mislead what their security program is actually like. We've seen them do that, and then we've seen them get penalized. We've seen them get fined. We've seen them face jail time, do all these things. Think about a major case that we saw several years ago. I think it was in 2016. I could be wrong on the date here, but Uber, their CISO and several people within the organization tried to hide the fact or cover up the fact that they had been breached, and then they paid it off as a bug bounty a payment. So a bug bounty program payment, saying, hey, yeah, these attackers, they found bugs. We're just going to pay them out as it, and we'll kind of cover it up, even though that's not what it started out as. So go back and look at that if you haven't seen that situation or that example. But again, that's just another high profile example. And when you try to cover it up, especially in today's world, you're just going to get hammered because of it. We see that. We see the penalties increasing. We see the the seriousness and the unsympathetic punishments that are coming out of that, or out of those kind of situations. And I think it's just going to get worse. The worst thing you can do is try to cover it up, try to hide it to your stakeholders. Own it. The more that you can own it and show that you've improved things, or that you have lessons learned, or that you understand the error of your ways, the better off you'll be. It's just one of those things, especially in this career field. If you're trying to hide these things, you're going to get punished. It's not going to be it's not going to be a good time, I'm telling you. So, and then we even see that further in this article. Not only did Blackbaud fail to protect consumers' personal information, but they misled the public of the full impact of the data breach, stated Attorney General Bonta. They're not going to have sympathy for you when you try to blatantly hide this stuff, especially when sensitive data is on the line and you're facing legal investigations and all these kinds of things. They're going to hammer you. And I cannot stress that enough. Do not try to mislead or hide these incidents. Next article, hackers derail Amtrak guest rewards accounts in breach. In a breach disclosure notice filed with the state of Massachusetts, the National Passenger Rail Service noted that an unknown third party gained unauthorized access to users' account information during the period of May 15th to 18th. Transport Giant determined that compromised usernames and passwords from prior breaches were likely used to access certain accounts, and stressed in the breach notice that there was no hack of Amtrak systems. So this is actually an important thing here. Previously compromised usernames and passwords. If you look at those dumps out there that have previous usernames and passwords that are leaked or that have been compromised, that is a huge concern in organizations. Password reuse is a major issue that really you can't necessarily you can't easily identify, because you would actually have to try to log in or try to brute force using previously known credentials in a lot of cases, because you shouldn't, just like in the last article, you shouldn't be storing unencrypted login credentials anywhere. So yeah, but that's why you implement things like password history, how often passwords expire, multi-factor authentication, all those kinds of things are helpful to preventing this. In some cases, the hackers took over accounts and changed emails and passwords to lock legitimate users out. Amtrak was able to nip that in the bud, though, and they say, we have changed the email address for your Amtrak guest rewards account back to your email address and initiated a reset of your account password. Excuse me. Threat actors have realized the high rewards of stealing from travel loyalty programs, which can easily be sold on the dark web or converted to tickets that they later sell, said Stuart Wells, Jumio CTO, in an emailed statement shared with media. So yeah, accounts like this, right? Loyalty programs, rewards programs, a lot of times those can have a certain level of monetary value, because if, for instance, you're racking up rewards that can be exchanged for something, used for travel, maybe in this case, those kinds of things, obviously there is a monetary translation to how many points or whatever it is, stars or something, I don't know, whatever value they use, compared to what it actually can be redeemed for. So there's a lot of accounts out there that have, a certain level of monetary value. It might not be 1 star to $1, might be something else, but that's an important thing to keep in mind, is how much your accounts are worth. Again, use those best practices. Use MFA, require require password history, so users can't reuse their passwords every so often. Make sure that they're resetting them every so often, changing them 90 days, those kinds of things. Next article, AMD investigates breach after data for sale on hacking form. AMD is investigating whether it suffered a cyber attack after a threat actor put allegedly stolen data up for sale on a hacking form, claiming it contains AMD employee information, financial documents, and confidential information. There's a quote that says, "We are aware of a cyber criminal organization claiming to be in possession of stolen AMD data," AMD told Bleeping Computer in a statement. The threat actor Intel broker shared screenshots of some of the supposedly stolen AMD credentials, but is yet to disclose how much they are selling it for and how it was obtained. So this is always concerning when you start seeing on these different forums that you have your data is up for sale. Even if you can't confirm that, just the idea of seeing that kind of puts, an uneasiness in your stomach. It's not a great feeling, that's for sure. Threat actor also said that the data includes an employee database that contains user IDs, first and last names, job functions, business phone numbers, email addresses, and employment status. And there's a screenshot here of the actual post. So, again, always concerning. As a cybersecurity professional, if you're not in the industry or if you are in the industry, either way, right? If you're trying to get into the industry, one of the things that is important is to monitor these different hacking forms if possible, because you want to be able to, you want to be aware of if your company data goes up on the dark web. It's an important thing to do. It's an important thing to understand. Even if you're just watching public news forums or cyber threat intel and whatever it is, different resources, you want to just be aware of what's going on, especially if you're a high profile company, a large company, Fortune 50, Fortune 500 company, but really any size company, because if your data gets on there, and you might also receive a notice too. Somebody might email you saying, "Hey, we have your data. You might want this back." But then it comes down to, can you identify if that attacker actually was able to access certain things within your network? And being able to identify that stuff and track and correlate all this information, as well as just seeing what they're actually saying they're selling, being able to build that whole story and profile of a situation, hopefully you can confirm or deny if that is actually the case. But yeah, ransomware and ransoms, data theft, all these things, these are just getting out of control. They are so commonplace in today's world that so many companies are facing these different situations. So again, understanding the risk of the data that you hold and the different controls that need to be in place and all these basic kind of things, as well as advanced measures that you can take, are all important, especially when you get breached. But then having a breach notification process, a way to notify people, probably give 2 years of free credit monitoring, like a bunch of these companies, but or I guess 1 year if you're in the Los Angeles Department of Health. So like we covered yesterday in the episode yesterday. But yeah. All right, so that's going to be the last article for this episode today. Again, this is Cyber Threat Intel. I'm your host, John Good. This is Wednesday, June 19th, 2024, and this is episode number 53. If you want to check out all the articles that we covered, as well as some other articles, make sure to head on over to cyberthreatintel.com. Again, cyberthreatintel.com, and you'll be able to find all the articles on there, as well as more show information. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for today. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you in the next one. Are you tired of overpaying for cybersecurity training? Are you interested in training from industry professionals? Are you looking for cybersecurity career services? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then cybertrainingpro.com is the perfect platform for you. At Cybertraining Pro, we're a one-stop shop for all your cybersecurity needs. We can train you for industry certifications or just improve your overall knowledge and skills in a certain area. Unlike other platforms, we don't stop there. We can also coach you throughout your career, practice your interview skills, or create a high-performing resume with our career services. Cybertrainingpro.com isn't just another training platform. Students get exclusive access to our private community, where we go beyond training courses to provide additional content, tips and tricks, and engagement with both other students and staff. Look, by the year 2025, there could be as many as 3.5 million job openings in cybersecurity. With so much opportunity, why not maximize your career potential with a platform that cares about your success? Come join us at cybertrainingpro.com and start building your future today.